This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Mike Sedita.
Hello out there and welcome to the Good Neighbor Podcast presented by 16W Media Group. I'm your host, Mike Sedita, and today we are joined by Cristen Martinez. She's the president and CEO of Martinez Law. Cristen, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
So glad to have you on. I always love talking to attorneys. I always find out so much interesting stuff. So just so you know what the Good Neighbor Podcast is and how we got started. So 16W Media Group is my marketing agency, and we operate the Good Neighbor Podcast under that umbrella. And there's Good Neighbor Podcasts all over the United States. I'm lucky enough to be the person here in Tampa that gets to talk to professionals and business owners like you. So tell us a little bit about your firm. What do you guys specialize in?
Sure. So we specialize solely in real estate law, which it doesn't sound that unique, but it really is. Unlike most real estate law firms, we don't have a title company. We don't do closings. We don't do any title work. We strictly handle the legal side of real estate. The majority of that is litigation, but it is all the legal side of real estate, and we don't handle anything else, never have.
Okay, so a couple questions off of that. From a percentage-wise of your business, are you mostly dealing in the commercial space or the residential space or like HOA type space?
So we recently actually made the decision to stop taking on HOA disputes for a couple of different reasons, but we do handle both residential and commercial. The majority of the volume is on the residential side.
Okay. So it's a weird thing. I mean, I grew up in New Jersey, and in New Jersey, a real estate transaction, there was always attorneys on both sides of that transaction. Besides the realtor, besides the title company, besides the financing, all that stuff, you had a real estate attorney. That's kind of the way it did. And not just a closing attorney that represented the finance company, but personal interest type stuff. In Florida, that's not required, correct? Like you don't need that to do the transaction. Give me a garden variety case for Martinez Law. Someone comes to you and is it a title dispute? Is it an easement dispute? Like what type of stuff are you running into mostly?
Sure. So while we do specialize in real estate, that encompasses a very broad range of case types, right? So the biggest percentage of what makes up our cases is contract disputes. So I am very much in favor of those attorney states. Like you just mentioned, we are not an attorney state, we're a title state, but I do think if attorneys were involved earlier on in the process, we would see a lot less disputes and litigation because a lot of the lawsuits can be boiled down to the contracts were not professionally drafted, or the buyers and sellers did not read what they were signing, or they didn't understand what they are signing. And those are such easy fixes, but a lot of consumers don't see the value of that on the front end when they've never experienced kind of the worst case scenario outcome, which is what we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
So from that, are a lot of those things that are occurring that you see every day, are they generally from FSBOs? Or are they from, and I'm not asking you to throw anybody under the bus, but are they from inexperienced agents who just don't have documentation prepared properly? Is it a combination of both?
It's a combination of both. And probably the vast majority of disputes we deal with do have real estate agents involved. But I think that's just because the majority of transactions in general involve a real estate agent. But we do see both. And, real estate agents are in such a tough position because they are not tax professionals. They are not lawyers. They are not construction experts, but oftentimes their clients, their buyers or sellers, want them to be all of those things. And so they want to make their client happy, but obviously they need to make sure they're doing things in line with what the law requires. And it's a really tough position. And sometimes you just have clients that don't take their real estate agent's advice. And that happens a lot of times too.
Yeah, I mean, so let me ask you this, is most of the stuff you're doing individual case by case basis, or are there some, I mean, maybe not like the big guys, like the Remaxes and the Century 21s, but they're all individually kind of owned franchises. Are you on retainer with some of these firms where they say, hey, look, Cristen, we want to have you here to just CYA, cover our butt and make sure all our I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Is most of your relationships in those firms and you have those relationships built in, or is it case by case, someone's calling you on something that goes out of whack?
So we really operate through building relationships with the real estate agents and the brokerages. So we certainly do have several brokerages on retainer. We also have a monthly subscription service for individual agents who may want that additional support in a more cost-effective and time-sensitive way. We do, of course, get those cases coming in from the individual homeowners and home buyers and sellers. Yeah. But the vast majority of our relationships are on the agent or broker side.
And then for you, in a time like, for example, I know there's a lot of changes going on right now with like condominiums, right? Like that's the big thing. I mean, there's the NAR ruling that kind of tweaks the way buyers agencies going on. I mean, that stuff I'm assuming affects you as far as from a legal standpoint. And some of the people have disputes over who's paying what to who. But then there's what's going on right now with condominiums and having to upgrade and make these changes. I mean, I'm not an expert on it, but from what I understand, a lot of it came from the collapsed building in South Florida, where they said, hey, look, we got to start to look at some of these buildings that have been sitting in salty air for the past 50 or 60 years. From a standpoint, and not to sound like cold about this, but from your perspective, some of those changes have to be pretty good for business, no?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. What I've experienced in owning my firm for the last almost 9 years is it's almost no matter what the market does, we're busy. If the market crashes, we have short sales and foreclosures and investor activity increases. When the market is really hot, we have a much larger volume of transactions. And so obviously bigger opportunity for things to go wrong. And then anytime there's a significant change in the law, like we see with the condominium statutes, as well as with this new NAR ruling, yes, that certainly increases not just litigation, which it certainly does, but what I'm doing a lot of right now, especially with this NAR ruling, is educating and consulting with brokerages, helping them draft up their forms and their template documents to use to make sure they're protected. So that's a big part of our practice as well.
Wow, that's great. I mean, yeah, knowing that this had been coming down the road here, it's been in the works for a while now, but because I talk to a lot of real estate agents, I mean, I'm always kind of in communication with them because of our agency, what we do. And it was kind of scary that me, just some random marketing guy who deals with agents, was more like in the know of what was going on than I would talk. Like I talked to some listen, there's a ton of really great agents in the Tampa market that are always dialed into what's going on. But then there's a bunch that are just, I'm like, oh, how do you feel about the NAR ruling? And like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Like, they don't even know what's going on. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity there to get people to understand you need to protect yourself in this kind of way. From your perspective, though, I mean, all right, so let's get some of this stuff out of the way. Like you guys have been in business for 9 years. Since you were a little girl, did you always want to be an attorney? Did you always want to be a real estate attorney? Like, how do you get from... I mean, I don't know if you growing up wanted to be a basketball player or ballerina, or was it always like an attorney? Were you litigating the playground, telling kids they were out of order and objection, or were you doing all that as a kid, or what did you want to do?
No, not at all. So I originally wanted to be a surgeon, which I can't do blood or anything like that. So I don't know what I was thinking.
Probably a tough field if blood's no good.
So, but it was actually in the 10th grade, I took a debate class in high school, and something just clicked within me. And I'm like, this is what I want to do. Like preparing the arguments, arguing in court, having to think on your feet. Like we did a little mock trial as part of the class. And from that point forward, I knew the only thing I wanted to do was be an attorney. And I never wavered from that. I really knew from that point. And then even throughout law school, I knew I wanted to litigate. I knew I wanted to be in the courtroom. I didn't really know what I wanted to fight over or litigate over, like the subject matter. Right. At first, I thought criminal and quickly changed my mind. And then I thought family law and just as quickly changed my mind on that. And when I graduated in 2010, I had one job offer, job market was really tough. And so I took it, and it was with a large firm who handled a lot of different practice areas. And I just happened to work really well with the real estate partner. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed working with this partner. And that's just what I learned and became an expert in. And so I didn't choose it, so to speak. I kind of fell into it, but I'm so happy I did. It's been such a great area for me from a business perspective. And then personally, it gives me that mix of litigating, but I also do a lot of, like we said, the education, some transactional work, some contract drafting, which is a nice balance with the stress and fast pace of litigation.
So, I mean, are you very analytical? Because some of the stuff you described, right? So, like, as I think of it, and like when I was a kid, I'm old, probably a lot older than you. There was a show called LA Law that was on TV, and I loved it. But then I realized how much I had to actually read, and I was like, I don't know, I'd rather be marketing. It's more fun. But the criminal side of it's kind of dirty, right? Like there's kind of like some grit to that. The family side of it is like super emotional and can be super sad in certain instances. Are you a very analytical person where the structure of, hey, there's these contracts, they still get to go fight it out? I mean, obviously we all like to argue a little bit. That's why I wanted to be a lawyer. Is the analytical side of it, is that more your personality?
I would say yes. And I think you hit it spot on. Criminal, I didn't feel comfortable in that world. Like I did an internship with the state prosecutor's office in undergrad. And so I was on the side of the prosecution. I wasn't representing the accused. But all of the kind of witnesses and lay people involved with the trial, they are not happy to talk to you. They are not cooperative. Like it was just, I felt like I was battling every single day. And I mean, also as a young woman, that was a tough environment for me too. And then you're right about the emotions on the family law side. I was like, if I do this, I'm never going to get married. Like this is just going to take a huge personal toll on me. So I think it was more those factors than needing specific structure, because I mean, in real estate law, you're absolutely correct. However, I mean, these contracts are constantly getting revised and amended. The law is constantly changing. Judges are constantly making decisions that, in my opinion, come out of nowhere and I never expected. And so I like the aspect of it, keeping me on my feet, on my toes, and being creative in that way.
So let me ask you some statistical questions, okay? And if you know the answer, great. If not, just make something up. No one's gonna. No, I'm kidding. So how many, from a caseload standpoint, in the average month, how many cases are sitting on your desk in the average month?
So right now we have 150 active litigation cases. However, I am one of 3, about to be 4 attorneys in the firm.
Okay.
So in the way that we work is, and this might be changing, but currently the way that we work, because each attorney within my firm has a different experience level and different strengths and weaknesses. So I don't have my handful of cases and another attorney has her cases. We all work as a team on all of the cases.
Okay.
So for the most part right now, I'm handling the majority of the trials. I have another attorney that handles most of the depositions. I have another attorney who's better at the drafting and the research. So we all work on all the cases together. So technically, I guess I have 150 cases on my plate, but I'm not handling those alone.
Okay, so then the next question of that is, out of garden variety, I mean, that's out of 150, how many actually get to go to trial versus how many get settled percentage-wise, roughly? Is it 50-50, or do a lot of them go to trial? Because the thing I always see, because I deal with a lot of attorneys too, is this court system is so backed up. Like people aren't getting trial dates for like medical malpractice for a year and a half from now, when people could die in the middle of that process. I can't imagine, and no offense, but I can't imagine that real estate law presides over a criminal case or some of this other stuff. So does a lot of it go to trial, or does a lot of it settle?
So the vast majority do settle. And when I say vast majority, I mean north of 95% settle. I mean, I've had cases settle the weekend before a Monday morning trial. So at any time pre-suit, like the dispute is present, but we haven't actually filed a lawsuit yet, all the way through the year and a half to 2 years of litigation, like throughout that entire time, we see settlements happen all along the way. So almost all cases settle. Typically, I go to trial about once per year.
Okay.
I've already been to trial once this year. I have another one coming up end of September that looks like is going to go. And we have a couple scheduled for next spring. So we're kind of now, whether those are actually going to go,
Right.
I don't know, but we're getting close enough that I'm thinking they might. But over the last 9 years, with the exception of the COVID year, I would say we go to trial about once per year.
And then has there been because I'm thinking real estate law and I'm thinking some of these things that could go wrong. Like, has there been a case where someone buys a piece of property, they're in this litigation and it takes 2 years and then they have to sell them? I mean, like, I can't imagine, like, does that happen? Like, I'm in this house, I live here for 2 years, I've been disputing this, but I have to live somewhere, so I'm living in this property, and then the case gets reversed and they get their money back and get out. Like, does that ever happen type of deals? Anything like that?
So not often. So most case types, the sale of the home during the pendency of the case isn't really going to affect the case.
Okay.
Sometimes it even helps because sometimes our position is, you sold me this home and you didn't disclose all these things that were wrong with it. So as a result, I have to pay to fix it. And now I'm going to get less when I go to sell it. So if you actually sell it and you can show that you did in fact get less, that's stronger evidence than telling the judge, well, I'm probably going to get less.
Right.
So just take my word on it.
Right.
There are cases where we are asking a court to unwind or undo the sale. So I'm going to give the seller the property back. They're going to give me my money back, and we're going to be put in the position as though we never met each other. Those cases are very difficult. Those, I don't know that I've never had one of those go to trial because there's so many parties involved. If I purchase a property and I make improvements to it, or I make repairs and then the transactions unwinds, the remedy is available in our contract, but practically speaking, it's a very difficult remedy. So those typically settle out, or the parties will say, I'll keep the property, just give me money. Like, I'm just going to ask for money instead of undoing all of this.
Yeah. A lot less complicated. You're already in the process. Just give me a number. Let's work on the number and be done with it. Sure. So we, for 20 minutes now, we've talked about a lot of heavy stuff. I mean, this is like people's lives. This is like a lot of heavy stuff. When you are not litigating 150 cases, what do you do for fun when you're not in the office?
So that's like the most difficult question for me because I not only, work in the law firm, I'm running the law firm. I do almost all of the marketing for the law firm. And I also have a husband and a toddler and 2 dogs at home. And so I was thinking, what do I do for fun? But really, I mean, right now my downtime is if I can be outside, I want to be outside, and I want to be with my husband and my daughter. So we spend a lot of time at the beach. We take little, weekend getaway trips. My favorite place is Miami Beach, but that's not
a family vacation. Miami Beach, like you're not bringing a toddler.
People look at me sideways every time I say this. We stay in a very residential area, south of all of the craziness. Okay. And we've even been, so our wedding anniversary is during spring break time. And we've even been not realizing it during spring break when there was a state of emergency and all of this. And it was totally fine. We're in bed by 10 o'clock at night. It's fine. I just love it. It's beautiful. I love the location, the people, so much to do there, the food, I just love it. And so we get down there as much as we can.
Are you Cuban heritage? Is that why you like Miami?
No. So my dad is actually Puerto Rican. So I'm half Puerto Rican and half basically European white on my mom's side. So no, I really developed later in life. We just randomly took a trip down there. I think there was some sort of lawyer convention or something, and we made a vacation out of it. And I just fell in love. Again, people look at me sideways, but my heart is in Miami.
Okay. So, and is your husband a lawyer as well?
No. So he did own a landscaping company, and now he's kind of changed to just doing exterior low voltage lighting. Okay. So he's an entrepreneur, but obviously much different area than I'm in.
Yeah. But that's good. It keeps things, if you both do the same thing, it's kind of like, who did you litigate today? Or who did you litigate today? Let's play with the baby.
Exactly.
That's cool. That's cool. So, I will tell you, I may know a guy that could help you with some of the marketing stuff. We could talk about that offline. But
Sure.
So your daughter, you say she's a toddler. She's 2. Is toddler 2-ish to 3?
Now I'm going to be embarrassed because she'll be 5 in January. I call her a toddler. I don't know. I would still probably call her a baby if I could. But no, she's 4.5. She'll be starting VPK in August this month. So
Okay, all right. So now we see how. Okay, so you guys have the baby is the baby, but the baby's going to be 16, graduate, getting her driver's license.
Exactly.
My little toddler is just getting her driver's license.
Exactly.
So one of the things I always like to ask entrepreneurs, and you've kind of talked about your story a little bit and some of that, but one of the things I always like to ask business owners is, when has there been a time in your career, and it could be professionally, it could be personally, a lot of people talk about COVID or the real estate market crashing and all the different things that were going on in their life, but when has there been a time where you've hit an adversity and you were like, you know what, I don't know if the firm's going to make it, I don't know how this is going to go, and what did you do to come out of it to be successful on the other side?
Sure. So, I mean, as any entrepreneur can say, I'm sure you're met with so many challenges that kind of change the course of your business and your life. One of the biggest ones that occurred, it actually is a combination of, it was at the end of the COVID year, which business was very slow. That's also January 2020 is when I had my daughter. So I was home with a newborn basically the entire year, not working as much as I was used to. And at the end of that year, we had, and as a lawyer, I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but it could happen to anybody. We had a situation in my firm where we were defrauded out of a large sum of money. So wow. At first, we thought it was going to be around $285,000. And I was like, I need to call a bankruptcy lawyer. Like, I don't know. And luckily, it ended up being, there were 2 separate payments. So one payment we lost, it was $30,000. And then the big chunk, the $255,000, we were able to get that payment reversed. So luckily it was only $30,000, but that was coming after a really, really down year.
Right.
And so for the next probably year to 2 years, probably 2 full years, I mean, it was such a struggle. I number one, wasn't taking paychecks. And then it got to the point where I was writing checks from my personal account to the business so I could pay my people and pay our bills. And so, we really had to whittle down our expenses. We sublet offices within our space. Luckily, I didn't have to let go any of my staff, but, no more meals on the firm, no more variable expenses. And then we just had to work our tails off to come out of it. And we did. But, now we've had a lot of really great success in the last couple of years. But I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't think about what it felt like to struggle and to not know what was happening to my firm, what was happening to my people. And that really shapes kind of how I make decisions now and how I treat things. And I mean, I'm glad that I went through that experience because I think I'm stronger, I'm smarter, and I make better decisions now because of it.
Well, first question, where's your office physically located?
So our office is in Lutz.
Okay.
And I live in South Tampa, so I pretty much split my time, Pasco, Pinellas, Hillsborough. So kind of wherever my schedule takes me is where I'm at for the day.
Gotcha. So, a couple of things you touched on there really is like that experience adds a layer of caution to your business dealings and probably helps you as an attorney as well, because now maybe where that might have been I don't know the details of it, maybe that might have been a blind spot previously. 30 grand, forget the 200 plus, 30 grand is still a big chunk of money. You never kind of fall for that blind spot again. So it gives you that kind of that mettle to toughen up, to be precautious with that stuff. The question I really wanted to ask you though is when you're kind of in that limbo period before you know if it's going to be 280 or 30, like the anxiety level that's going on in your brain, in your body, how long of a window is that before you find out, okay, look, we're able to claw back, or stop, whatever you do to prevent the bigger chunk? How long of a window of that is there? And is there any sleep going on for that number of days?
So luckily it wasn't a very long window. I think it was about a week. It felt, of course, much longer
Yeah.
than that. But I mean, there was lots of tears, and my sister actually works for me. She's our CFO. And so her and I just kind of working together, crying together, trying to figure out, she's like, I can go without a paycheck. You can go without a paycheck. Here's what, so, I mean, it was a really, really, really hard time.
Well,
Okay.
and you're an attorney, so I assume in that week window, you're literally playing every possible scenario out in your head of, if I do this and I do that, and if we do this and we do that, and that mental stress of that takes its toll on people. But then on the flip side, the next question I have is, when you find out that it's only 30 and not 280, like, what is the feeling of like relief that goes on? Do you remember where you were I'm assuming you remember where you were sitting or the phone call or whatever. What is that elation like?
I absolutely remember. And I just remember saying, like, I am the happiest person who has just lost $30,000. Like, it's not fun to lose $30,000, but we could deal with that.
Yeah.
And to kind of add a layer of complexity and stress, this was out of my trust account. So I got to answer to the Florida bar on this. Right. And my bank was like, we're freezing all your accounts. My personal accounts are with the same bank. So they're like, personal accounts are frozen until you pay this money back, which I didn't have the money to pay back, So I was thrilled to have lost $30,000.
Yeah, I mean, that is really great. I can only imagine like the feeling of like, it's the weight of the world. 280 is a big number. And then when it's only 30, it's like, all right, 30 sucks, but it ain't 280, and I can figure out a way to manage around it. That's a great story. Let me ask you this, as we start to kind of wrap this up, what is the one thing that, whether it's a homeowner, whether it's a realtor, whether it's, I'm assuming you still deal with some title companies because there's some of their stuff in there too. Talking to your consumer, what's the thing they need to know about dealing with Martinez Law, but you and your team? What's the one thing that differentiates you guys from all the other attorneys that do this out there?
Sure. So I'll kind of bring it back to the tagline that I came up with for my firm. Like, before I opened the firm, I had a $75 self-made website. Like, I had nothing professional, but in my past positions in firms, the reason why I started my firm in the first place, which was never, ever my plan, was to focus on client care. So most firms that I worked with, their focus was on their bottom line, their profit margins. Like, the clients were important, but not quite as important as our bottom line. And as attorneys, it should not be that way. And so our tagline is redefining legal care. And I liked that term care. To me, it has a different connotation than, customer service or something of that nature. And so, we truly do, we are a business, of course, but we take our fiduciary duty to a client, which means I have to put my client's interests above my law firm's interests and above my own interests. We live that out every day, and we really do value client care. And so, a lot of things are said about attorneys, and sometimes they're true, sometimes they're not. But the whole reason I opened up my law firm was to be different from the typical or the perception of attorneys and law firms that a lot of consumers have.
The tagline is powerful as a marketing person because there is a juxtaposition in those three words of the term legal. It's legal. It's very professional. It's granular. It's detail. And then care is very soft behind it. So it kind of gives you that this is the hard thing and this is how we handle it softly for you, which is really nice. So you're not the marketing person, but hell of a job with that because it's really great the way you came across that. So the $1 million question, or hopefully it's maybe $1 million question for you, is what's the best way for people to get a hold of you? I just signed this contract and I feel like it's going in the toilet. I need somebody to represent me. How do we get a hold of you guys?
Sure. So we've tried to make it as easy as possible. Everything can be found on our website, which is martinezlawfla.com. But that will give you our direct phone number and email address for intake purposes, as well as you can contact us directly through the website. That's all going to go to our intake team, and they'll be in touch shortly with next steps.
So, folks, if you're listening to this, it's not the $75 do-it-yourself website that she started with. It's MartinezLawFLA.com. You could do your intake form there. You could do all that stuff. If you need to call and speak to somebody, you can call 813-803-4778. If your lawyer likes to vacation with her 5-year-old toddler in Miami and South Beach, nothing is going to rattle her in the courtroom. So you definitely want to reach out to Cristen and her team at Martinez Law. Cristen, thank you so much for being a good neighbor. Thank you for being on the Good Neighbor podcast. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast Passcode. To nominate your favorite local businesses to be featured on the show, go to gnppasscode.com. That's gnppasscode.com or call 813-922-3610.